there's nothing we can say that will make that better. But golly, what a senseless tragedy. But I do want to ask, and man, this is awkward to bring up, but we didn't know what we know now back then about head trauma, and back in my day, people used to say, "Oh, it was bell rung," and that was sort of it. And now we've learned and we've gotten better, and I'm thankful for that. But when you're getting, to try to process all of this, and I think a lot of people, don't want to hear that maybe CTE was a part of this, and think that that's a cop out or an excuse. And I certainly understand it, but CTE did become a topic during this era, and Chris Benoit did become one of those examples. And with what we know about concussions, well, how you've had a bunch of those. Does
Yeah.
it start to get into your mind like, man, I don't know what happened with Chris, but if we kind of shared the same experience in the ring, that has to be a little scary, right, man?
It is. It is. And, we're talking about doing this benefit for Steve Mongo McMichael
Yes, sir.
in the beginning of September. And you asked me, like, how quickly was I on that? Like, in the
Immediately.
affirmative. Oh, I'll be there. I don't care if I have to spend next day in Chicago. I mean, I was a huge Bears fan from the time 1969. I had a Dick Butkus poster hanging over my bed, and he finally signed it like 25 years later, which is a good story for another time. But I love the Bears. I remember when Deborah was my assistant, I told her, I said, yeah, I was a big Bears fan. I said, I bet you I could still rattle off 10 names from the 86 Super Bowl team. And she went, really? And I went, boom, 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 and had them all. And so here's Mongo, who was just not just larger than life in that he was a 275-pound monster of a man, but lived life with a gleam in his eye. And he looks like he's down below 100 pounds. It's heartbreaking. You can still see the light in his eye. And you can't prove that it was the concussions, but there's definitely a link between football and pro wrestling and early onset ALS. Conrad, I went as a guest to Chris Nowinski's to the gala for the Boston Center for Traumatic Encephalopathy. I think it's called Concussion Legacy Institute now, but I figure as long as I can continue to say Boston Institute for Traumatic Encephalopathy, I'll be okay.
Yep.
But there was a running back who was in a wheelchair with early onset ALS, and he said, it's the same thing that you did. He said, back in my day, they said, you got your bell rung.
Yeah.
You got a dinger. And he said, if instead of being told I had my bell rung or I got a dinger, if my coach had looked me in the eye and said, you have just suffered a traumatic brain injury, he said, I might not be in this chair.
Wow.
Because we really downplayed
Yeah.
head injuries. Guys who did not wrestle with head injuries were looked down upon. We had the benefit, like when I had a concussion, I could say, hey, listen, man, don't hit me in the head today. Let's go after my knee. That's something we could do. But really what we should have been doing is taking 10 days off or 8 days off. But you just did not do that at the time. We learned so much, right? Like going back to the cell match, I'll say during my shows, hey, we've learned a lot. And if the same situation presented itself in 2022, that match should be stopped.
Yes.
And I'd say, luckily for me, in a weird way, it wasn't, because had that cell match been stopped, it would have trended. Now, let's just say this was a new match. It would have trended for 2 days and then been forgotten.
Yeah.
And instead, because of the actions of the survivors, meaning me and The Undertaker and Terry Funk as well, it was like a snowball going downhill, gathering momentum. But the line I use, and you've been at the show when I use this one, it's like, we didn't stop matches. We bought time.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that, but it's also like living in the dark ages, we don't buy time these days. We stop matches and we don't worry about the match that day. We worry about the next, 30, 40 years of that participant's life. So we have learned a lot. I know that the CTE diagnosis has been really helpful to Chris's dad. Uh, I have to feel like something went wrong in there because he was such a humble, nice guy, very intense, very difficult on himself. But, I don't remember many people having a cross word with Chris. He was very highly thought of. I could not call him a good friend because he was one of the guys that I went, "Hey, Chris, how you doing? Family good?" And you think, like you go through that same routine and you realize that other than the two times we traveled, like we never really had a big conversation. But it was always pleasant, and especially when Nancy was there with his kid, with this boy Daniel, I'd gather around and spend a little extra time because Nancy and I, had the friendship going back to 1990, 89, actually, when I joined WCW. So I'm still skeptical as to whether anybody, no matter their brain condition, would have it in them to pick up a gun and kill someone they love. Like, I don't know. That's a step beyond. I say it probably would not have happened had he not had the brain injuries, but I don't think you can blame it on the brain injuries alone, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.